All right, good morning. We will go ahead and get started. So for those of you who I haven't met before, my name is EDI Release. I am the business analyst here at the Department of Labor and Industry, working on the Workers' Compensation Modernization Program. Today, we are going to talk through some frequently asked questions that specifically apply to our eForm trading partners, which would be all of you. We submit through the campus portal. And then I'm also, if we've got time, going to touch base on the email that was sent out, just outlining our EDI release. Some of the things in that release are going to be pertinent to the eForm trading partner, some are not, but I just wanted to take an opportunity to kind of go through that and answer any questions. As always, I will make sure that this is recorded. We will plan to get this up on our website. Additionally, I did go ahead and just mute everybody, disabled video since we've got a number of participants today. And I ask that if you have any questions or comments, please just add those to the chat. I'll be checking that periodically throughout the meeting. We'll be able to respond as necessary. So jumping right into our agenda, this is going to look very similar to the last agenda. I'm going to go through some of the frequently asked questions that myself and the EDI team are seeing, specifically coming up from our eForm trading partners. We will then go through a QA and a demo. If there are any questions that you all have or anything you need to see demonstrated, there are some limits on demonstrations, but I can do as much as possible depending on the question. Please don't feel like you need to save your questions for that section. I may just not address them immediately, but please just put them in the chat as you have them. As I mentioned, time pending, we will go through some of the items in the EDI release, which, as I mentioned, would also apply to you all on this call, many of those items. And then finally, we'll kind of discuss upcoming answer hour sessions specifically for this group, just to kind of determine the need going forward with these answer hours. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and get right into the frequently asked questions. So the top question is one that I've been seeing a lot frequently. I know our EDI team has seen it as well, where some of you all are submitting your FROI UR, you're then submitting a FROI 02 or FROI change, and then you try to submit your SURE UR and the system will not allow it. This is a defect on our end. There is an issue with the FROI sequencing after those FROI 02s. So essentially the sequencing is getting off balance between the FROI UR and the SURE UR when you submit that FROI 02 within the same time frame. That is something that we are going to address in our EDI release at the end of the month. So I will talk through that a little bit more when we get to that email, but that is something that you may be experiencing if you are in a situation where you filed your FROI UR and then you filed the FROI 02 before submitting your SURE UR. The next one is an issue that I've seen just intermittently with some users, and it's an issue where a user will submit a filing and the employee information will match their own information. This is actually not a campus defect, but I did want to call it out since you all are manually data entering information into these files. So in these instances, what I have seen is that people have their Google Chrome autofill settings set up, and for some reason or another, it is auto-populating those employee fields since it says first name, last name. So what I would recommend is that you either disable your Google Chrome autofill settings, or you just make sure that you double check the information before you hit submit. We can update that information on our end if the employee name is changed to yours, or you can always submit something to revert that back. But the easiest way to kind of deal with that is just prevention. So as I mentioned, it's not a campus issue, but it is something to keep in mind as you're using Google Chrome or other browsers that may have that autofill functionality for those name fields. The next one is a transaction party error. So some of you are seeing an error message that says transaction party or row count error. In those instances, the easiest way to fix that is just to go ahead and make sure that your employer address is complete. Double check and make sure that all the addresses are complete within the filing, but it's most specifically occurring on FROI URs with the employer address. So please just make sure that you're double checking and you're entering that address if at all possible. That will usually clear this issue. When I try and submit a Shroy transaction, nothing happens. What should I do? So in those instances, let us know. Typically, what we would have you do is we would go ahead and have you try and get a shot of the console log, which is pretty easy to open up. I did just go ahead and create a short reference video for that. So I will go ahead and distribute that to the proper people on our end so that we can send you those instructions if for some reason you're running into that issue. That saves us from having to do a touch point call. You can get the issue resolved much faster for you all rather than having to wait to schedule a separate screen share call. The next two, I'm going to defer to those until I'm in the system just to show you all exactly how those should be filled out. The transaction, my transaction said it was submitted. Do I need to wait for DLI to approve it before completing my next transaction? The beauty of being an eForm trading partner is that you do not. As soon as your submission is processed, you click that submit button, we've got it. As long as you get that confirmation page indicating that it went through successfully, you should be able to just go ahead and go right on to the next transaction. No need to wait for us on that one. Where can I find the transactions I've already submitted for a claim? And where can I find the documents that have been created for a claim in my eForm submission? I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cover those in when I hop into the test system as well. So I'll go ahead and I'll show you all the benefit segments and the payment segments. And I will also show you where you can find that transaction history, as well as your documents. I'm going to go ahead and just get into my eForm system here. Apologize, got to move my WebEx windows around a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and click Submit an eForm or web form. I'm going to pick an existing claim. Oh, I apologize, I picked the wrong one. Submit to an existing claim, and then just choose from my claims list. And it just takes a second for this to update. So I'm going to go ahead and use test employee. And I want to submit something that's got a benefit segment and a payment segment. So I'm going to go ahead and select the IP just to show you all. So now my screen's loading. And I'm not going to complete this whole form. I just kind of want to run through the benefit and payment segment for you all, just so you're aware of what needs to be completed within those segments. And I do see a couple questions in the chat, so I will get to those as soon as I run through this demo information. So since we're focused on payment segments and benefit segments, I'm actually just going to go all the way down to this benefit and payment details section. What I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to add a benefit, and it's going to give me this window. Now, something that's very important to remember with your benefits is that you can only have one of these little boxes for each benefit type code. So if it's a situation, let's say where you were paying TDD and then it switched to TPD, and then now it's switching back to TTD, you would not want to create a third little box in that instance. You would just want to update your existing TTD box with that information. You'll often error out if you've got multiple boxes with the same benefit type. So just a good kind of point to remember as you're doing this. So in this instance, I'm just going to go ahead and report the TTD that I have paid for this employee. I am going to specify temporary total disability. My gross weekly amount is just going to be my compensation rate. I'm going to go ahead and put $600 for this one. My gross weekly amount effective date is almost always going to be my date of injury. So in this instance, it looks like my date of injury is 10/1/2020. I'm going to put that date there. My net weekly amount is almost always going to be the same as my gross weekly amount. The only difference is, the only time that it wouldn't be the same, this net weekly amount and this net weekly effective date, is if for some reason you're taking an adjustment or a credit or an offset on that benefit that's being paid to the employee. So in this instance, I'm not doing that. I'm just going to go ahead and put 600. My net weekly amount effective date is going to be the same in this instance. And then I'll just want to put in my benefit from and through dates. So in this instance, I'm just going to show a week that I've paid. I'm going to put 1 week, and I'm going to put 0 days. Now, I know some of you have been getting a display error where it says must be a whole number. Go ahead and disregard that. We have that documented on our side. It is just a display error. It will not prevent you from submitting the transaction. So if you type in a 0 here or here, not a problem. It's going to flash red, but just disregard that. I'll put 600 for my paid amount. And then I'm going to put my benefit payment issue date as today. So we're going to want to fill out every field in this instance because we are reporting that benefit for the first time. Now, since I'm doing an initial payment transaction, I also need to put in my payment segment. The difference between the benefit segment and the payment segment is going to be that this typically is going to reflect the very first check that you cut. This sometimes will, this benefit segment, but sometimes it may reflect additional benefits that were paid. So in this instance, since I just have the one benefit that's going to my employee, it's going to be pretty similar to what I put up top. I'm just going to type the employee's name in here, the payment amount, the from and through dates, and then my payment issue date. Now you can see here I've got that payment segment all filled out, and I am good to go. I'm going to go ahead and get back out and get into a claim so I can show you all exactly where you can find those forms and your previously submitted transactions. I'm going to go down here and just grab one or retest. And so here I'm in the claim details page. If I want to see what I've submitted, I'm going to scroll all the way down and click on reporting history. You can see here, I've only submitted a first report of injury on this one, no other transactions. Now, if I needed to find the document that goes with that first report of injury, I can click this hyperlink. That will take me to the document. If there is not a hyperlink, that means it's a transaction type that does not generate a document. So just something to keep in mind, if you don't see that hyperlink, it means that a document would not have been generated for that transaction. You can also go to the Documents tab to get that. So you can see here I have a couple things. I've got my first report of injury, I've got a notice of representation, and I also have this discontinuance. So something that's important to note is that the discontinuance in this instance was generated from a discontinuance web form rather than an eForm transaction. I'm going to go ahead and hop back into the FAQs and take a look at what has been submitted in the questions here. All right. So the first one, there's a user who is having some issues with legacy claims where users aren't being allowed access even though the adjuster is set up with the global claim access. Lynette, if you can send an email to the EDI help desk and copy myself with that information, that would be helpful so we can take a look. The insurer feed does not load when we are filing Lefroy. Has this been fixed? Is it only happening to those of us who have multiple insurer names? So in that instance, it may be because you have multiple insurers, because we wouldn't be able to tell which insurer you're filing on behalf of. If it's a situation where it is a Froy UR and you are filling it out, it's possible that the fiend is not on our side of the system. So if you are noticing that, it's likely one of those two issues. When would the gross weekly amount effective date be different from the date of injury? So the only time that would really be different, I believe, would be if you are adjusting the comp rate due to, I want to say that it would be due to a cost of living adjustment or something of that nature. Let me see if I've got anybody from compliance on here who might be able to chime in. I see Melissa and John. Do either one of you have any other examples of when that gross weekly amount effective date may be different from the date of injury?
Oh, go ahead, John.
Partial. In partial, you report the gross and the net would be what you're paying on the weekly basis, and if it's fluctuating on the you use the last weekly amount paid for temp partial. So I think I was doing something else, but Angie's example is $600 if you were actually only paying in temp partial $300, and you'd have those effective dates and everything be the last weekly period for temp partial.
Great, thank you so much, John. I have another question that I think compliance, it may be best for you all to answer. When a Troy PY is generated, when a short PI is filed to generate a new NOBP form, we are reporting the settlement and the benefits and multiple fees and 350 other benefits as the other benefit type code. Which of these individual payments needs to be reported on the Troy PY when the payment exceeds the maximum allowed number of payments? Should only the first payment for each type be reported? The maximum allowed is 5 payments on the Troy PY. So in my opinion, I think you would want to include the actual settlement payments or the benefit payments first, but I am going to defer to compliance as they're the group that would usually review these. So basically payment segments on a settlement if there's more than 5.
Sure. So I'm not sure if I'm completely understanding the question correctly, but if the question is that there's multiple checks for the same payment type, is that so? For example, if there are multiple payees and different checks are being sent, but they're all under, for example, the 340, you would just do the one sum of that 340 benefit, and you would list the multiple payees in the payee section. I'm not 100% sure if I'm answering that correctly. Go ahead,
I think
John.
what's happening is they may have to do more than one PY. So if you could break them out, and so if you have more than 5, make the benefits segment reflect the payment segments of those five rows, basically, of the payments. And then the next PY you'll update the benefit segment again to add more for the additional payment segments that you're sending. I think that's probably the only way we can do that. And it should be exceedingly rare.
So it's a situation where I have TTD, the settlement, so I have the employee and the attorney fees, and then multiple medical interveners that we paid.
Yeah, you could maybe put all the medical ones into a different PY if you wanted, and have the 501 be separated a little bit. Eventually the claim will look correct and look current, but you just can't get them all into the one PY, if that makes sense.
So would we serve the final PY form then, I assume? Because they'd all be there?
You'd probably have to serve them all, and you might want to add additional information to the employees of what's happening, because might be a little bit confusing. But yeah.
Would I add the additional information on the PY form or in a separate letter?
I think a separate letter.
Okay.
All right. Thanks for jumping in on that one, John. Melissa. So the next one, a request to show a sure you are on a legacy claim. What benefits paid to date will pull forward and what will need to be entered showing the current ongoing benefits? So when you do your sure you are, the system is actually not going to pull any of the benefits that you'd previously reported to us in. And the reason for that is because our previous system was obviously paper-based versus EDI. So the data isn't always going to be available on every single file. So in this instance, when you're doing your sure you are, what you would want to do is just report a kind of an aggregate of what you've paid for those different benefit types to date. So in an example, if we were looking at that previous example where I was adding those benefits to that IP, it would be just like that. You would have one box for each benefit type that you've paid during the life of the claim, and you would just type in the aggregate date. So the first time you paid it through the last time you paid it. What we're really going to be looking at is the number of weeks and days, and then the total amount paid for that benefit type. Hopefully that helps explain that a little bit more. Next question, benefit outline. If we paid TTD and then TPD and then TTD again, I understand that you only want one box per type of benefit. Do I enter all TTD and all TPD in each box, even though the dates will not be consecutive? This is another one. I'm going to defer to either Melissa or John on this one. I believe that the answer is yes, that you would. I just want to make sure that I'm getting that correct from a compliance standpoint.
Yeah, sorry, this is the confusing part about EDI, and especially when you're filling out a web form, it gets even maybe more confusing. So if that was your scenario where you paid total and then you would do a change of benefits to temp partial, and then you maybe change back again to temp total. When you get back to that second iteration of temp total, you'd start it on the RB, and your start date on the RB would be the date that you started payments again, and your through date would be through the date that you're making that first payment again on the RB. When you then go again to suspend it, you still just have that one box like Angie showed, but then your temp total your original start date would go all the way back to that first time you started paying temp total. And then your through date would be through the suspension when you stopped paying that benefit again. So that's kind of how it works. It sort of builds the claim in all of those transactions. But in that little box, it can be a little bit confusing how you structure that. So I hope that answers that question.
Yeah, thanks, John. I'll go ahead and try and do like a short example of that. So I'm in this transaction that all I've done is my 00. But I'll go ahead and just show an example of what it would be like if I was going to do a maintenance type code with benefits. Bear with me just a second while this loads. And then as this is loading, I think there was just a clarification. So John, for the answer to gross weekly amount different than the date of injury, or date different than the injury, Does that mean we report every TPD payment separately rather than in total? If so, then would we have to do multiple PY forms again? So I think just some clarification on that.
Yeah.
Anton?
So if you're paying for temp partial, you're still reporting. You're probably not paying. You're probably not sending a PY. You're sending some other transaction, the IP, the RB, the SX, the CB, and so let's take a scenario. Let's say you've had 4 weeks of temp partial has come in and you're going to pay it, but it fluctuated throughout those 4 weeks. The last week that you paid it, if that amount was $300 and the dates for that last week is what you put in that benefit segment for the temporary partial, even though it fluctuated throughout the time. So you might have 4 weeks paid at a rate that doesn't necessarily equal the total amount, but well, I should say that's one way to report it. In older EDI and the earlier releases, people would try and average out those 4 weeks to report the and the dates for that period of time. And not maybe if Angie could show it, it might be a little more helpful, but that's how it works.
Yeah, so I'm actually going to go ahead and right now I'm going to show an example of what you do if you had that different amount. So John, if I'm following correctly, let's say this is like $200 with an effective date of 12/1/2020, same net weekly. And then if I just put 1 week, 0 days. Is that what you were?
Yep. Yep. Maybe that's easier
Okay.
to see for everyone that it kind of seems a little bit, but that's how it works. Now, if it were, let's say it were 4 weeks instead of 1, and $200 was the last week, the last of the 4 weeks, you'd show 200 even though the amount paid might be greater than $800 or less than $800. That's where temp partial gets a little bit confusing, and we're not taking the reduced earnings segment, but that's where if you're reporting every single week, that's where you'd show additional information. But that's how it works for temp partial.
Great, thank you so much, John. So to go back to the previous request for that benefits outline. So in this instance, I have these two benefits, and let's say this is what was reported on the IP, and I'm coming back in here because I need to do a change in benefit. I'm currently paying temp partial. I need to go back to paying temp total. So we can leave this, 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 and this all the same. These top 5, all the same, because none of that would have changed. The benefit period start date, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to change that to my most recent. So 12/29/2020. And I'll just put 1/5/2020. 2021. All right, so in this instance, I already had my 2 previous weeks that I paid. I'm going to add another week to that because this is a 1 week period. And then I'm just going to add another $600 to my aggregate. So I'm going to add this to be $1,800. Oops, and I apologize, I put the wrong amount in the weeks. And I'm going to update my benefit payment issue date as well to the most recent one. So the instances where that may differ would be your SA. So if I was in a situation where I was reporting a sub-annual or anything else that was kind of a sweep is what it's called, it would be my original start date through my current end date, same weeks and days, same amount, and benefit payment issue date usually is not required, but you would usually just want to put your most recent benefit payment issue date. Hopefully that makes it a little bit easier to understand. I apologize if I confused you even more. But in this instance, you would just want to make sure that for sub-annuals or SA transactions, you're going to want to show the aggregate for the date. When you're just picking it back up, you're just going to show that most recent period in this temp total for the dates, but you're going to have your aggregate in the weeks, days, and type amount paid. All right, it looks like I've got another question in here. With computer system changes over time and not all the paper forms available, I'm not sure if we have or will be able to obtain dates of payment amounts for benefits paid. Should we use our best guess for the early payments, or is there a way to obtain paper file forms that were previously filed? So my understanding is if it is something that was sent to us and is in our imaging system, or was in our imaging system, which was our previous, it should be available to you within the Documents tab of that claim. So if you file your 4UR, you should be able to go and see those documents if they're there. If for some reason you don't have them and you aren't really sure how to report those benefits, I would recommend just kind of reaching out to our EDI team, help desk. We can escalate that to somebody who can maybe give you a little bit better idea of what to file in that instance. So we are at 10:32. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to hop into this EDI release just to kind of give you all a little bit of an overview of what was sent out. So many of you all likely received this email on the 11th. What this is just some updates that we're making to EDI, but they would also apply to our eForm trading partners. The one that will likely be the most impactful for you all would be this one, where claim adjusters will be granted access to a file if their email address matches someone within the group. So that's a very important one to take a look at. And then also just some of these sequencing updates and error message updates that we are going to add and clean up in the system. So I know one of the really big ones that a lot of you are seeing, one that I called out, was that SHROI O2 and benefit sequencing. So the EDI release should clear up some of those errors that you all are seeing where you filed the 4UR and then you filed that 402, and now you're having trouble filing the SHROI. That's a really major one for you all. So this, just to let you all know where this can be found on our Campus Central page if you did not get the email. I'm also going to go ahead and put this information in the chat. If there are any questions about this, you can always reach out and we're happy to answer those questions. It may just take us a little bit to respond as we're still dealing with a high number of emails and questions from individuals. So going back into the slides, last thing I wanted to cover is our Campus Central page. Before I go to that page, I do want to kind of gauge interest from this group on continuing this eForm answer hour. So if this is something that you all would like to continue, it would be great if you could put some feedback in the chat as to whether or not you'd like us to continue these or roll them into the insurer answer hours. We will continue our EDI answer hours as well. And then also if you guys could just provide an idea of the frequency. Right now, the plan is to keep these either on a monthly basis or a bi-weekly basis, just depending on the needs. So going back into the Campus Central page, I apologize, I'm having trouble getting back to my window here. Bear with me just a moment. we review this in all of our answer hours just to let you all know where all this information is. This is kind of our central depository. So you can see here that message that I was just showing you all with EDI, that's right here. We're going to put copies of those Gov deliveries here, just a link to those messages, along with our FAQs, quick reference guides, answer hour updates, and then our release updates as well. So our releases usually go through on Thursday evenings. So we try and get that information put into the Campus Central page on Friday afternoons or Mondays, just kind of depending on the size of the release. And I am seeing that you all would like to continue these calls, so we can definitely plan on kind of fleshing out the schedule. I will see what we can do as far as getting these kind of scheduled, and it looks like maybe some additional training is requested as far as filing forms. And I apologize. I can do that to some extent, but I know that there's no way that we could cover every scenario with that, since these forms are pretty long and have a lot of fields. There's no way to cover every scenario, but maybe we can start covering some specific scenarios. If there's a scenario that you would like to see covered, please send those to us via email. We can take a list of those and see what we can kind of get through in the next answer hour. It looks like there is a question as to how to close a file. So something that I just kind of want to point out, you may be seeing that the status of your file is open in Campus. That's a DLI status. If you need to report that you're closing the file on our end, you can just submit a final transaction. Usually the only thing you have to update on those is just the claim status code, which you would switch from open or reopen to closed. I can just demonstrate that really quickly. All right, so getting back into my test system here. Submit to an existing claim. I'll grab Mary Jo's claim. And let's say I just need to close this one. I'm just gonna go ahead and click FM final. Go to next. This will upload, this will bring in all the data that I previously submitted or that's on file. And then the field that you're going to want to update is your claim status. So I'm going to let this load. You can see I don't have anything currently in my claim status, but usually it's going to say open. If I switch it to close and I submit this, we will know at the department that your file is closed. You might still see your status as open on the file. That would be the department status. And I see there was a question about how the insurer fee was not filled in. In this instance, it's likely because I have multiple insurers listed, but I can take a note of that as well. Is there an update as to where you're at with trading partners not being able to view all claims on the home page? I do not have an update on that at this time. I would recommend still going through your entity pages for those, just because I know it's pretty inconsistent what's showing right now, but I will follow up on that. Any last questions? If we miss changing the open status on a file to closed, do we need to resubmit I'm going to defer to compliance for that one, but I believe the answer is no, that the final in itself would probably be sufficient. John or Melissa, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, getting the FN, I think, would be enough for us. We would see that you're trying to file the FN, or that you did file the FN. That would be fine.
Perfect. All right. So it looks like I'm to the end of the questions right now. I'm going to go ahead and just make a note. It looks like we have a few issues that need followed up with, so the insurer scene question, and then also just not all those claims displaying in the first action. So I will take a look at that. If there are any questions, please feel free to send those through our help desk or to our EDI team. Can certainly attempt to help with those. And we will plan to touch base with most of you likely next week at our Insurer Answer Hour. Thank you all so much for attending today. Have a great rest of your day, and we will talk soon.